approaching sunset. Traffic southbound number 3 lane. Exiting at sunset. Traffic exiting at sunset. We'll notify LAPD.
911, what's your emergency? This is how can I help you?
911 emergency, what do you report?
Everybody, and welcome back to We Speak Dispatch, where we speak dispatch. Today, we have a special episode for you. We're going to talk about books, leadership books, public safety books, books we've read that we've enjoyed, and we hope that you've read them, maybe want to join in with us in the comments, or maybe want to pick one up for yourself. So let's go to Doug. What kind of book have you read that you really enjoyed?
I just told you not to go to me first.
Oh, sorry.
Let's go to Joe first. Joe, go ahead.
Well, I would say one of the first books that I read that really helped me with my management career was Your Roadmap for Success. It's by my mentor, John Maxwell, and it just really talked about career advancement and learning about how you can motivate employees. And it was a great book for giving me the leadership training that I needed for becoming a supervisor. And that book, I wish I would have read a lot sooner than what I actually did.
Yeah.
Okay. And Leslie, what kind of books have you read that you tend to lean toward?
Well, before I became a supervisor, I was big into fiction. I mean, reading was for pleasure, not necessarily to learn anything, except, you know, when I was, but I found as I promoted up the chain or got more responsibility or just kind of matured a little bit more, I realized that I needed to read some of these nonfiction books, some of these leadership books. So I went to, in California, there's a program called SLI, and it's a leadership institute. And throughout the 8 months of this class, we read 2 to 3 books every month. And there were some months that it got a little bit difficult, but there were some other months that it was super simple. And there's a couple that I have, so I'm gonna bring out one right now. We'll circle back around. So,
Circle back. Oh, God. Here we go.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah.
I read it a long time ago and I was like, okay, whatever. And then I read it again as a supervisor, and it's not an easy read, but there's so many great things in here. And because one of the things that stuck with me about this one was there's a whole section on having your own mission. And because in public safety, so many of us work for agencies that have mission statements and core values, so that's kind of ingrained in us. But this one is talking more about how you have your own personal mission and how you schedule your time and prioritize what you're doing based on that mission. And obviously, hopefully your mission is in support of your agency's mission, so you're not doing 2 different things. But this one was a really great one for me. Doug, what about you?
Okay, I'll pass. And then, no.
Well, actually, I'd like to back to the highly effective people. I've worked in a couple industries. I've worked in hospitality and finance industry. And that book, I always see that popping up on people's Facebook pages who are in those industries. So that one is really one that goes across the whole spectrum of leadership and any sort of industry. It's not industry specific.
Yeah, and it's really, I was looking for the publication date, but I mean, this is at least 25 years old.
Oh, at least, yeah.
But the things that it's talking about, you can apply to work, you can apply to home, you can apply to your relationships with your family. And there's several other Cubby books, you know, for relationships and families and stuff like that. But this one truly is, Jill, like you said, it has absolutely nothing to do with public safety.
No,
but it has everything to do with public safety. So this one is, put this on your list. Okay, now Doug.
Jill, did you want to cut me off again, Jill? No, I can go.
We're good.
Yay. I come at it in a different way because just the way I've been functioning with our own company is I like to approach everything in our business from a business standpoint. So I'm not reading a lot of stuff that's from like how to be whatever with police or what. I read a lot of business stuff that I can apply into our world of dispatch and public safety. And there's so many different books out there that have so many great things. This is one of my favorites right here. This is Scott McKain's. He wrote the first one called All Business is Show Business, and they did a second one, which is All Business is Still Show Business. And he talks about how everything we do, you have to have reactions to. Like if you just tell people, oh, we answer calls, there's no reaction to it. But if you say we save lives and we do all these things, and then they want to do that. And his whole thing is, he talks about the fact that like movies can inspire you through music. You can either be laughing or sad based on just music. And business is the same way. If you've got a business where you walk in the store and the person behind the counter just sitting there, I mean, you're not going to want to buy anything. But if you go in and you get engaged by that person, things will change. And that's the same thing with public safety. If you've got people that are misfunctioning or dysfunctioning out on the floor, what are we doing to inspire them to come back into what our world is, our saving lives? So him and believe it or not, there's another great guy I like to listen to on podcasts and read his articles when they come out, is this guy here, John Taffer. John Taffer is from Bar Rescue. It is so good. The stuff he talks about is so relevant to our business. One of the things that he's patented, and this is his thing, it's called reaction management. You have to understand the reaction of a change. And his whole thing is, you think I'm in the bar business because I serve drinks? No, I serve experiences. You come in and you get a plate of food and it sits in front of you. You just look at it going, yeah, I guess it's food. There's no reaction to it. But if you look down and go, whoa, that's cool, you're going to want to eat more. And same thing with drinks and things like that. And my thing is, it applies to us too. When we change a policy, do we think about the reaction management of our floor? Or do we just throw it at them and say, good luck, or we change equipment or whatever we do? So I try to look at the business world and kind of bring these ideas into our world. So that's kind of where I'm at.
That's awesome, because like you're saying, I'm thinking as you're talking about, there's two things that dispatchers hate: change and things staying the same. And I'm just thinking about an agency that I know of right now that's going through some supervisory changes and some other things. And it's like people have lost their minds.
Yeah.
And that I'm writing that title down because I'm going to go and look at that.
It's a good one. I've included it in several of our presentations now because it's so easy to take the business aspect and throw it into public safety and think, do we even consider the reaction management of getting new employees, of getting a new supervisor, of changing your center, of just basic change? Nobody thinks of the reaction management. When I was working at the Highway Patrol, they gave us texting with little or no prep. It was like, Tuesday, you're going to be texting. What was the reaction management? They didn't care. And I think we should be caring about our reaction management of these things. So that's a good one. I like that one.
Awesome. So you guys have all talked about the books that you enjoy reading for leadership. What are some books that you would recommend for public safety professionals that would geared more towards public safety versus just leadership in general? Leslie.
I didn't bring it up here, but The Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. That was one that I had read a long time ago and then read again through SLI. And it is, although it's written it's written specifically for field units, every single scenario in there has relevance to what we do in dispatch. And it talks about sometimes, and maybe this isn't you, but maybe you know somebody who this applies to, where they started the job super energetic and they couldn't wait and they were so excited about being a part of the dispatch center, and then fast forward a few years and they are a completely different person with different perspectives. Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, pick that book up because it starts to explain how that disconnect happens, but it also gives you some solutions on making sure that that doesn't happen to you. So it gives you some practical applications where you can make sure that you don't turn into that, or your coworker, or maybe your loved one, your spouse, your friend, or whatever. But that's a really good one.
Yeah.
That's
okay. What about Joe? What's something that you would recommend?
Again, kind of what Leslie said, more from a field responder stance, but one of the best public safety books I read was called Visions of Courage. It was by Trooper Bobby Smith, who has since passed away. He was a trooper that was shot in a traffic stop and lost his vision. And then he talks about how he found his vision after losing his sight. And he ended up losing his job. Then he gets rehired back, and just the obstacles he overcame from being injured in the line of duty and what he went through to get his job back. And then the fact that he went around the nation and publicly spoke around at state conferences. And I actually had the honor of speaking at a state conference that he spoke at, and was able to pick him up at the airport and drop him off.
How cool
There's
is
a little
that?
funny story there as well. He was truly a great person, and that book is emotional. That book is impactful. and it's extremely strong. And then a second, I'm going to give actually 3 real quick.
Oh, goodness.
The second one is called,
Overachiever.
the second one's called Arresting Communication by Lieutenant Jim Glennon. It talks all about communication and what field responders do. And it even talks about the proper place of saying certain words that maybe you shouldn't typically use on the dispatch floor, such as swear words, and talks a lot about things that they go
That
through,
happens?
which will help dispatchers understand why sometimes when they come across field responders with some attitude over the radio, maybe why they sound the way that they do. So it's a great book. And then the last one isn't really necessarily public safety, but it's military, which is kind of lumped into it. And if you're ever looking for a book to see what they go through, this is probably one of the most emotional and, it's Kyle Carpenter, You Are Worth It. And he was the military person that put himself on top of a grenade and it blew up, and what he went through and overcoming that and getting flown back home and everything he's doing for the military. And it just really puts in perspective how hard you have to work sometimes to be successful, and what he has overcome is truly miraculous. So those 3 books are kind of a little bit different in one way or another, but they really helped me out in reading all of those.
Wow. That's a good one.
And Doug, what's your favorite public safety book?
Well, again, I don't come at it from that perspective. So
Mhm.
I'm usually going on the outside of things, and like I look for people that can provide some sort of motivation to everybody. And like Sully Sullenberg wrote this book called Making a Difference, and he's got several of them out there right now that are just really good about inspiring people to do the best they can, not necessarily a dispatcher, but everybody. And it's such a good thing. I mean, I also listened to a really great guy on podcasts, and he's got a lot of videos up on YouTube, is Ross Schaefer. You probably know him maybe from Match Game. He was a host back then. He has his own talk show for a while, but he's a really great, he knows how to encapsulate stuff and talk about things. One of the books he wrote is called Nobody Moved Your Cheese. Because you know that book that came out that said, who moved your cheese? He said, all you're doing is giving somebody else the power. Nobody moves your cheese, you moved, and you got to move out of it. So it's like, it's just very powerful. I can take those things and apply them directly into public safety communications. And a lot of people think it's such a different thing. Don't think of it. No, it's the same thing. We just have to approach it differently. And Ross talks about Tony Robbins. You know, Tony Robbins, the motivational, big, huge, giant guy. He talks about him and he goes, this guy has never had a business. He's never managed a store. He's never done anything. His entire business is enthusiasm. That's what he sells. And he said, I think Tony Robbins is so positive that even if he was locked up in jail, he would probably say, I live in a gated community, because it's just, he's got this
Right.
thing. And it's like, so I take all these people that are speaking about inspiration and stuff like that and apply it into our world. And it's worked so well. It fits. And a lot of people don't think it fits, but it really does.
Well, and can I want to point out something, because I fell into this trap when at my agency, our entire supervisory team, so civilian supervisors, sergeants and above, all the way up to the chief of police, we would read leadership books, but we would also read books as an entire agency. So from cadets all the way up to the top. And some of those books, we read John Maxwell, and we would get together monthly and have kind of like an Oprah book club. We'd talk about things. And when that first started, I fell into the trap of reading the book and saying, well, we don't do that. Well, they don't do that.
Yeah.
We don't do that. And I was keeping score in my head about, why am I reading this book? Because we clearly don't do any of these things.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until one of the conversations that we had that somebody said, this isn't a scorecard. This isn't to compare our agency to what these people are doing. It's to look at yourself. Where are you in that book?
Yeah.
What can you do better? And and that was one of those aha moments that changed the way I read any leadership book from there forward, because, all of these good people make tough choices, leadership and self-deception. That's another great one. It forces you to look at where you are in either the problem or the solution and how you can make yourself better. So that's just a little tip for those of you who may be reading some leadership books and you get disheartened because you think, well, our agency doesn't do that. It's not about what your agency is doing. It's about what you're doing.
Yeah.
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 Oh,
One of the things with that, Leslie, that I would say is when I started reading these leadership books, a lot of times I would read it and I would be thinking, well, geez, I am doing that. And why am I not getting the outcome that this book says I should get? But then I told myself, slow down, stop, and ask myself, am I doing that all of the time? Or am I just remembering the one time where I did? And I started looking at just myself in reading these books and then making mental notes of saying, okay, this is how I need to approach that. And it's made a world of difference. And I encourage everybody that's a new leader or promoted from peer to supervisor to read some sort of book. If your agency isn't sending you to leadership training, you can go out and get leadership training yourself. There's a lot of books out there.
I think we put out some great ideas for everybody. I think we're coming up on our 15-minute mark.
Are we at time? Okay, well, one thing, podcasts. I mean, obviously podcasts, you're here, you're listening to our podcast, and Doug mentioned it several times. If you've got a commute to work and you're like, I don't really like to read, so many of these books are available on audio or find the leadership podcast. We can certainly post some of those other podcasts down in the notes here, because you should be making time to do these things to better yourself, better your agency, better your organization, even if it's listening to something in the car.
Well, let me just dovetail off of what she just said. Is I started recently, and it sounds goofy, but you have to approach it with a positive attitude. I started downloading these graduation speeches, these commencement speeches from like Denzel Washington. And I mean, it's unbelievable the knowledge that they're throwing out there at a commencement that probably, 20 kids heard. And it's like, but when you listen to him now, you can apply what they're talking about. And he's talking about perseverance and staying focused. And I mean, they're so good. I put a bunch of them on my MP3 player because I like to listen to them now going, that makes sense. That makes complete sense what these people are talking about in these commencement. Tim Allen, he's got a great one out there too. I mean, there's a lot of them that if you're just driving to work, you can listen to it for 20 minutes. And if it doesn't inspire you, move on to the next thing. Find something that does.
And last thing, Jill, another speech like Doug talked about, make your bed. It's just a really famous one and easy to follow along and pretty short. And it's a real easy, small book to read, but it's worth reading as well. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Jill.
So I actually Joe, you just reminded me, or actually Doug with the graduation speeches. For my graduation from high school, I got a book called Wear Sunscreen. And it was a song. And it's just talking about all the things you should be doing every day. I need to go back and read it because it was actually it made a lot of sense.
There's a lot of them on YouTube right now that are so good that I would have never even listened to. I mean, some of these people are just comedians, but when they're talking, and you can really hear the meaning behind it and go, holy cow, that makes sense.
Yeah. And you just have to be, you have to be in a place to hear the message.
Right.
Wherever it's coming from, in whatever medium that you're listening or reading or whatever, you have to be ready. It's just like anything else. Somebody can tell you need to do X, Y, Z, but until you're ready to do it, it's not going to make anything.
That is very true.
Yeah, and you can actually, probably a lot of those books, you can actually find them broke into podcasts.
Yeah.
So I've seen some of them as podcasts versus books. So instead of having to read the whole book, you can just go download podcasts that talk about pieces of the books. So I think that's it. It's been a little awkward. I'm hosting for the first time. So,
Well, we're probably heard on different podcasts and things like that, Jill, don't you think?
oh yeah, we are
she's
heard on
been
various podcasts
everywhere.
around the country and around the world. So
That's
Over
right.
20 countries now have been
Yeah.
listening to this. So that's
our
even
podcast,
better.
and then we still have bracelets, or we don't have bracelets. We have stickers and masks still available for anybody who wants them. I forget where I am sometimes. So anyway, I hope you all have had as much fun as we have. And if any of the books that we talked about, you guys want more information on, drop us an email, drop us a comment below, and I'm sure Joe, Doug, and Leslie will be happy to get you that information. So
Absolutely.
there we go. Have a good one, guys.
Adios.
Happy
Thank you.
reading.
Hey, this is Jill, and you've been listening to another great episode of We Speak Dispatch, proudly sponsored by our friends at Zybex.
911 emergency. What do you
Southbound number 3 lane.
911, what's your emergency?